Hey, everybody. Hi, I'm Rebecca Giannini. This is my group. And if you are here, I am so glad that you're here. I'm a parenting and relationship coach. And every week I go live on everything to do with communications, relationships, parenting, and all of that. So if you are here because you want to improve your relationships and you are here because you want to be the best parent you can be, you're in the right spot. Tonight, we are talking about co-parenting when we have differing views on how to parent. So we're going to talk about how to do that more effectively. But before we talk about that, let's talk about why differing views exist in the first place, because that is a big part of where the issue comes from. So oftentimes, in the families that I work with, I'll have one parent who has done a significant amount of research and one parent who is more like fly by the seat of their pants. This is what my parents did. This is what I want to do. Here's what I think is right. And so you have one parent who is done more research and one parent who hasn't, but has deeply held beliefs about what they should do. So oftentimes where I see people falling down in this dynamic is the parent who has done more research often I want to say this gently. Often the parent who has done more research and has more education on the topic can come across really condescending and can come across as a know-it-all. And so it basically creates a situation in which the other parent feels like they're being spoken down to, the other parent feels like their point of view isn't valid, like they feel disrespected in the conversations. And so it sets up this dynamic where one person believes that both people believe that they're right, and neither one wants to back down. And so it essentially creates a battle of the wills in the parenting dynamic. And there is use of force used. So it's like there's stubbornness, digging in of their heels, and then the same dynamic is repeated in the parent-child relationship, but both people feel like the other person is the one causing that damage. And so it's basically this self-fulfilling cycle where the parent who has done more research is like, oh my gosh, it's so evident that the power struggles that we're dealing with are as a result of the way that you're parenting. And the other person who maybe has not done as much research is like, oh my gosh, this evidence is so clear. The reason our kids are acting up is because you're too permissive, or because you're trying all these new approaches that just don't work. And so they are looking at the same evidence, but making different conclusions. So if that sounds like you, then you are in the right spot. And stay tuned. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of different skills, and those skills I can't cover it all in this short video, but I have done other videos and other lives on these topics. So I'm going to mention reflective listening. I'm going to mention repair work and problem solving. And if you are interested in those other videos that are related, then let us know in the comments, and I'll make sure that either myself or Christina gets you those related videos. Okay. All right. So the first thing we want to do when we are navigating this conflict, and by conflict, I mean this probably ongoing conflict that you have with your partner about how we are going to navigate the parent-child relationship, we want to identify common goals, because most likely both of you have the same goals. Almost every parent I've ever spoken to has said some version of this story. I want my kids to have better than I have. I want my kids to be successful. I want my kids to have good relationships. And I care about the type of parent I am. almost all across the board, every parent has told me their version of that story in their language that they use. The problem is we often use very different language to our partners. And so we often don't hear that story because it's said very differently than the way we would tell our story. And so I can hear from a parent who thinks that spanking is the best thing in the world. I can hear that same story. I want my kids to be respectful. I want them to have healthy relationships. I want them to have discipline. I want them to know how to navigate. I want them to be successful in their careers. And they think that spanking, or they think that yelling, or they think that really strong, immovable boundaries are the path to that outcome. I can talk to a parent that thinks that by offering no discipline at all and offering no boundaries and letting the child decide all of the things that they're going to do, they think that that is going to offer them the outcome that they're after. And we don't want to be on either end of the extreme. So oftentimes we were parented with rigidity, with this authoritarian way, this style. And so we knew that how that affected us. So a lot of parents swung all the way to the opposite end of having this really permissive parenting style, and they don't know how to enforce healthy boundaries. They know that use of force isn't helpful. They know that hitting isn't helpful. They know that yelling isn't helpful, but because they didn't have a healthy model for how to do that in a meaningful way, they swing all the way to this opposite side. And then they continue to revert to things like yelling or threats or bribes or punishments, even though they're trying to do that differently. We all revert back to what we know when we don't know what else to do. And so our patterning comes out. Our wounds come out when we don't know what else to do. And so even you who is the viewer here probably knows that spanking isn't helpful. You probably found this group because you were at your wit's end and you wanted to stop yelling at your kids, and you knew you wanted to do better, but you find yourself in the position where you are reverting back to some of those ways. Your partner is likely in that same story, but a different, a little bit different of a story. It's the same story though overall. Every single parent wants to do what's best for their kids. Now, sometimes our best harms somebody else. That is very, very true. And if you're here, it's probably because you want to cause the least amount of harm and do the least amount of damage and be the best parent that you can be. We can't do that though when we're constantly in conflict with the other parent. We can't do that if we're constantly modeling this power dynamic of my way's better, your way's better. My way's better, I'm not going to do it. We're not going to cooperate. I totally disagree with what you're doing. This is all your fault. No, this is all your fault. If we're engaging in that dynamic, we can't do the best for our kids. And so we've got to find a way to speak to people with respect, even when we're upset. We've got to find a way to problem solve. We've got to find a way to listen to each other, even when we're upset, so that we can model for them healthy conflict resolution, so that we can model for them how to navigate situations when both people have differing ideas. So the first thing that I would recommend is for you to go and do the, sorry, I forgot which group I was live in. I was thinking I was live in my clients only group, but you are not yet clients, and maybe some of you are. But I was going to tell you to go through the online curriculum, but either way, I still have my reflective listening available for those of you who are not yet clients. I have those videos. So go through and look at the reflective listening, because one of the first things that you need to start working on is your listening skills, even if you feel like the other person is dead wrong, even if you feel like the other person's perspective is not valid because they haven't done any research and you know that their way of parenting is causing damage. even though that's true, especially if that's true, you need to work on your reflective listening skills, because you need to be able to help that person bridge the gap from what they're saying with their words, what they have language for, and the story that they're truly telling. Because the story that they're truly telling that you want to have access to is, you want the best for our kids. You want them to be respectful. You want them to be able to navigate their job effectively. You want them to have meaningful relationships. And you're not going to be able to access that story if you can't hear it reflected in their words. I promise you it's there. So if you are in this conflict, and if you are the partner who is the one doing the research, which I think you might be because you're here, I would first recommend going and listening into the, excuse me, I can't speak right now. I would highly recommend doing the reflective listening, watching those videos, and then I would recommend looking at the repair work videos, because often what's going to have happened in your situation is that you will have done some damage to your relationship by treating them as if their say isn't valid, as if their perspective isn't valid, because they're wrong about some of the things about how to raise children, and then you know that their way is just not backed up by the research. The problem is most of the times the person who has done more research has this air of superiority about them and cannot treat the other people with respect when they know that that person is wrong. And then it is an art that we have lost in this world, how to speak to somebody when we disagree with them, when we fundamentally disagree on views. And this is something that we need to learn how to do better. Is I can show you respect even when I disagree with you. I can show you respect even though I think what you believe is harmful. This is even more challenging when we share children with that person and when we feel like this person is causing harm to our kids. I get it. I totally get it. But we need to be able to do it. We need to be able to model. I can offer you respect even when I'm upset with you. I can offer you respect even when I disagree with you. And I can look past this language that you're using that might be unhelpful language. I can look past that and get to the heart of what you're saying, which is you want the best for our kids. We need to be able to identify those common goals that we have so we can start working toward those goals together. If we don't know what our common goals are for our kids, we're never going to be able to get there. So most of the times parents focus on, especially when there are differing views in the family, they focus on the problems that are there, which we do need to address, but they focus on what the other person is doing wrong as a means to try and fix the situation rather than where we're actually headed. So when we can start having this conversation and talk about what our common goals are, then we can start heading there together. We can't get there together though if we don't know where we're going. So I might start by having a conversation that sounds something like this. Hey, so-and-so, I feel like we're fighting all the time. I feel like we are not a team anymore when it comes to the way that we're parenting. And I feel like it's getting in the way of our relationship in some ways. And it's certainly getting in the way of us being effective with the kids. I'm not here to blame you. I know that I have a part in this conflict. I think we both have a part in this conflict. And I want to figure out how to move forward respectfully so that we can model respect for the kids and so that we can have a better relationship, the two of us. When's a good time to talk about that? Or maybe you can let me know when's a good time to talk about that. You basically bring up the topic and you say, hey, here's my white flag. This isn't going to be an attack. We're going to listen to each other. When's a good time to dive into this more deeply? You basically get consent for that conversation and say, here's the topic. Here's what I want to talk about. When's a good time? And that person might be ready right then, or they might say they're ready right then, even though they might not be. But whenever you get consent for that conversation, we're going to move forward with trying to identify the common goals. And so I would start by giving them the floor and say, Tell me what you think. Tell me why you feel like we're in this position. Tell me why you feel like we are having this issue with them showing disrespect, for example. And you listen from their point of view. You listen to truly understand what they're saying, not to refute what they're saying, not to prove them wrong, not to poke holes in their story. You just listen to what they're actually trying to say. And as you're listening, you want to listen for this question. What's the most important part of this for them? What do they want based on what they're saying, what do they want the kids to be? Based on what they're saying, what good do they want for our kids? And that is a different task than you've been asking your brain to do. Previously, you've probably been asking your brain, find me all the ways in which they're wrong. Find me all the ways in which they're harming the kids. Find me all the ways in which they are getting in my way of creating a healthy environment for the kids. And your brain dutifully is providing that evidence for you and providing those answers for you. But our goal for this conversation is a different one. Our goal for this conversation is what are our common goals and how do we get there together? So in order to do that, as you're listening, you need to have an expressed goal for your brain to find that commonality. So as they're sharing their story, even if their story is, well, I think the problem is that you're too permissive, right? Okay, tell me more about that. Why do you think that's the problem? And you're really listening from their point of view. Why does it feel like this is a problem? And based on that, what do they want out of this situation? And most likely, if you are listening well, you're going to hear some version of that story that I hear from parents all the time. I want my kids to be respectful. I want my kids to be successful. I want my kids to have a happy life. I want them to have better than what I had. And in their mind, being really harsh, or in their mind yelling and having the kids jump the moment they say to do something, or having their kids, whatever it is, they think that is the path. So it's not that we disagree on where we're going, we disagree on how we get there. But the goal here is to say, hey, oh, wow, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I can really hear how important respect is for you. I can really hear that it's important for the kids to have a successful work-life balance. I can hear how important it is for you that the kids are able to navigate their career in a healthy way. They're probably primed for you to disagree with them. They're probably primed for you to be condescending. So I would be really conscious about your tone of voice. I would be really conscious about your posture, and really come up with a genuine response that says, I can hear that story. I can hear that you desire for our kids to be successful. If you're listening for that, you'll hear it. It is going to probably take some practice, though, as you've been telling your brain to do a different job in previous conversations. Then you're going to say, okay, I'd like to take a turn sharing how I think that we are currently getting in the way of that common goal. Wow, that's a common goal I have. I want to take a turn talking about what I think the problem is, and then let's come to an agreement about how we should move forward after we've both shared our sides. Does that sound like a good plan? You'll likely get agreement to that, and maybe you need to break this up and have this in 2 different conversations. But then you take your turn, and you want to make sure that your turn is focused on behavior and not character statements. You don't want to make statements about who they are as a person. You're too authoritative. These are examples. You're too authoritative. You're too hard on the kids. You always this, you always that. We want to steer clear of this is who you are. And we want to come back to, I notice when there's a lot of yelling in the house, the next day, there's always such and such. The next day, going to school in the morning is always crazy. I notice when we are fighting, bedtime that night is a nightmare, and it takes forever to get them to go to bed. Talk about what you see in the environment versus who they are as the problem. So much of the time we were taught to talk about the way that somebody else is harming us as a form of a character statement. you are this, you are that. And we want to limit that as much as we can. We want to come back to, this is what I see when such and such happens. We want to talk about behavior and the impact of the behavior versus who they are. That still might be really easy for that person to respond to negatively or defensively, because we were taught to couple those things. We were taught to associate my behavior with who I am. So if somebody is saying they don't like my behavior, they're saying they don't like me. And most people can't make that distinction. Most of us were taught to think in terms of your behavior is who you are. A quick example of this is, if so-and-so lied on the playground as a kid, he didn't lie, he's a liar. We were taught that what you do is who you are. And so as you're talking about this, even if you're not making character statements, which you probably are, it's easy for somebody to hear this thing that I do means I'm a bad person. You're calling me a bad dad. You're calling me a bad mom. You're telling me that I am harming our kids. You think I'm a bad person, right? You think I'm the kind of person who doesn't care about my kids. And so we want to know that that is probably how some of this feedback is going to feel. So we want to get ahead of that and say, I know how important it is for you that our kids are respectful. I know that you're trying your best to make sure that they're respectful. We have different ideas about how that is going to happen, but I can see how important this is to you. You want to get ahead of that idea of I'm calling you a bad dad or I'm calling you a bad mom by saying, I know how important this is to you. This thing that you do, though, here's the impact that I'm seeing. So the first step is going to be identify. Well, first step is always going to be consent. I realize that cannot be a given. That is new information for a lot of people. But in this group, if you've been here for any length of time, you know that consent for conversations is huge. It's so important. Oftentimes we push people's boundaries in conversations because we weren't taught how to have boundaries in conversations. So we want to get consent for the conversation. That's the first step always. Then we want to identify our common goals. And then we want to talk about what we think we're doing, what we think we're doing to get in the way of those goals, what we think the other person might be doing to get it in the way of those goals. And then we want to come up with a plan. Your plan, excuse me. Your plan is not going to be set in stone. Your plan is something that from the get-go, we're going to revisit this in 2 weeks. Hey, let's come up with a plan. Let's try it for a couple of weeks when we have some more data and revisit it again when we have some more data. When we've tried this for a while, we're gonna whatever plan we come up with, we're going to try it for a while and see how it goes. Then we're going to revisit. And then we're going to make tweaks to that plan. And then we're going to revisit. And then we're going to make tweaks to that plan. And then we're going to revisit. But the idea is we are going from being on opposite ends, from adversarial roles, to looking at the problem from the same side. We're looking at the problem, which is we're not parenting effectively, and we're looking at it instead of you're not parenting effectively, you're getting in my way. We're saying, hey, we are not parenting effectively. What can we do differently to get to our common goal? Then you're going to come up with your plan. And then you're going to try it. You're going to try that plan for a couple weeks and then revisit. And as you revisit, we're not trying to point fingers at where they failed and where we failed. We're looking at it as, hey, we're trying this, we're working together here, and let's see how we do when we make these tweaks. So that is the first thing that I would do. Those are the first things that I would do if I were navigating a parenting situation where I was in conflict with the other parent. I can tell you from firsthand experience, this is helpful. It will work. You do need both parties to have a sense of respect for each other for this to work. But even if you're navigating conversations this way with somebody who doesn't have a lot of respect for you, you can make incredible changes when you start shifting the way that you communicate with that person. I have worked with families who are navigating horrific divorce proceedings, and even when only one person is on board and doing the work with me, the changes that are available are so incredible. these skills, these communication skills will literally change your life if you allow them to, if you practice them. So let me know which videos you want. There's definitely repair work that is going to need to be done from parent to parent, because we harm each other. When we're in conflict, we harm each other. So you're going to have to probably do some repair work about past conversations you've had where you have made that person believe that they're a bad parent, or you've made character statements about them, or you have, spoken to them poorly in front of the kids, or you have, let your frustration got the best of you and you raise your voice to them, or whatever it was. You're going to have repair work conversations to do. So I would definitely recommend going through and looking at the repair work videos. I also absolutely would recommend doing the reflective listening videos, because your brain has had so many messages about how we listen to people, and that we shouldn't offer respect to people who view things differently to us, who are wrong about the facts, or who won't listen to facts. And oftentimes that's not true at all. I have seen people make such incredible changes when they feel listened to. And if you can truly listen to your partner and you truly start reflecting back what they're actually saying to you, you would be really surprised at what that parent is willing to do and willing to try when they actually feel like their perspective is being listened to and validated. And I can guarantee you, again, that their perspective is, I want the best for my kids and I want them to be happy and healthy. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to check the chat real quick and see if there are any questions in the chat. There's also another video on if a relationship is salvageable. And if you are in this place of trying to figure out, like, maybe the co-parenting is just way co-parenting or other differences are just way too difficult, and maybe we should be heading for divorce. How do I do divorce effectively? How do I do that in a way that doesn't harm the kids? There's a video, I want to call it effort gap versus skills gap, that would be really helpful. And there's a whole section in the guides about co-parenting and navigating adult relationships. So if you need more resources on that, just let us know. We will get you the resources. And if you are ready to take this to the next level and start getting one-on-one help from me, or group help from me for your particular situation, and you are ready to take your relationships to just levels that you probably can't even begin to fathom right now. If you are ready to have healthy relationships and navigate communication in your family in a better way, let me know. We have programs that are designed to help you do that. And I will talk to you soon. I will see you next week at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. And be gentle with yourself this week, as always, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye.